And industry members. On behalf of BBG, I welcome you to the webinar on Equalization Levy. As most of us are aware, the scope of Equalization Levy, or EL, was expanded to cover within its ambit e-commerce supply and services with effect from 1st April 2020. As the law reads today, it covers all B2B and B2C transactions across digital and non-digital businesses. As with any new law or a law in its new avatar, there are several ambiguities and interpretational concerns relating to EL. It was speculated that the government will come out with clarifications, FAQs, and perhaps defer the EL. However, this does not seem like happening, and the date of compliance with EL provision still stands at 7 July 2020. We have with us here today Naveen Agarwal as the keynote speaker to address some of these concerns and give more clarity on this subject. Naveen is an international tax partner with KPMG India. He has over 25 years of experience in consulting and in advising clients on diverse tax and regulatory matters across technology, media, telecom, consumer markets, hospitality, and internet commerce businesses. He is also the partner in charge for US India Corridor for KPMG in India. He's also on the committee of prominent industry bodies, just to name a few, like BBG, US India Business Council, AmCham, India Canada Business Chamber. Come and introduce our second speaker, Rishabh Srivastava. Rishabh is the director with corporate and international tax practice. With over 16 years of experience, Rishabh has advised clients across industry verticals, including hospitality, technology, media and entertainment, online travel, manufacturing, and other services sector. He has extensively worked on diverse and challenging assignments covering tax advisory, compliance, litigation, and regulatory matters. So before I hand over to Naveen to take this webinar forward, thank you and over to Naveen.
As I mentioned, the first part on the left side, you will see the 2016 levy that I spoke about, which had a limited canvas. It was only applicable to online advertising or digital advertising services. And that levy was on an Indian resident. So while a resident Indian advertiser was making a payment to a non-resident, they had to deduct tax or withhold tax at the rate of 6% while making the payment and remit that amount to the government. So it was a compliance that had to be done by the Indian payer. Moving on to 2020, the scope has been expanded. This was not there in the original finance bill, which was tabled on 1st of February. It was brought in through an amendment in the finance bill, which happened in the last week of March, and it got legislated as such without much discussion in the parliament. So it's come in as a bare law. There is no explanation or there is no memorandum attached to the Finance Act. So one does not one is not able to comprehend the overall intent of the expanded levy, given the way it is currently drafted. There is no exceptions or carve-outs made, so it applies to a wide variety of sectors. There is no exclusion for related party or, so it applies to both related party and unrelated party transactions, B2B and B2C transactions. So the scope is extremely wide. If I look at on the right side, the charge is on non-resident e-commerce operators, and the emphasis on the word e-commerce operator, which has been defined, that receive consideration from e-commerce supply or services that are provided or facilitated to three categories. And I'll come a little bit later on what is meant by e-commerce operator and what is e-commerce supply or services. But it covers three categories of covered persons. First is a person who's a resident in India. The second is a person who buys goods or services using an IP address in India. And the third situation is where a transaction happens between two non-residents. So even if the transaction is between two non-residents, for certain specified categories, one which includes sale of advertisements which are targeted to a customer in India or a person who's accessing the advertisement from an Indian IP address. And the second situation is a sale of data from a person resident in India or using an Indian IP address. So I know there's a lot covered here, and we'll try and sort of give you some examples to help you comprehend how wide the scope of this levy is. But essentially, it's a charge of 2%. The charge is on the non-resident e-commerce operator. It doesn't mean that the non-resident e-commerce operator has to have any presence in India. A number of these transactions could be happening remotely, and therefore it adds to the additional burden of the non-resident to do registration and do compliance in India. Take an example of an online sale of goods in its true form. So there are a lot of today retailers. I mean, you've taken M&S as an example, Marks and Spencer. Instead, if one was to sort of sell the goods online, and let's say for hypothetically the sale is happening from outside India and not from within India. So a non-resident entity, overseas entity that is making a sale to a customer in India, and the customer logs on to the website, overseas website, places an order for certain merchandise. That order gets accepted online, and then the shipment of goods happens offline and reaches the customer in India. Is this the case of online sale of goods? Or this is not a case of an online sale of goods because the sale is actually happening, has multiple elements to the transaction, and not all elements of the transaction are happening online. These are the kind of questions that this levy is imposing, because there is no definition to what is meant by online sale. There is a definition in the law as to what is online sale of goods. So in that sense, not only the digital goods, but the physical goods could also be covered within the scope of online sale. The second part is online provision of services. Now, unlike online sale of goods, the word online qualifies the word provision of services. So what is critical to determine in this situation is, are the services being rendered or provided online by the non-resident e-commerce operator? It is not good enough if there is only a mere transmission of the service that is happening online. So to give you an example, let's say if I'm sourcing certain services from my group entity outside India, and which very often happens where we're seeking intercompany services. Now, what happens in those situations? Though there could be a wide variety of services. Some of these services could be such where you can argue, or when you can take a view that the services are actually not provided online. Finance, HR, legal, all of these services are not necessarily provided online. The work actually happens offline, but the delivery or the transmission of the end product may happen online. We'll discuss this in more detail as we get into the case studies to help you understand what the issues could be. First is a turnover-based exclusion. So if the annual turnover or the gross receipts from your covered transactions, I just talked about the covered transactions, is less than 20 million INR, or about, roughly about $260,000, that will be essentially what is not covered, and that has to be tested for a full financial year, which is April 1 to March 31st, with respect to each non-resident entity. So that's one exception that has been provided. And the second is where the non-resident has a permanent establishment in India. So if they have a taxable presence in the form of a permanent establishment, and the supply of services is effectively connected with that permanent establishment, then equalization levy will not apply. And third is where the 6% equalization levy, which I spoke about, came about in 2016. When that applies, then the 2020 levy ought not to apply. So these are the three carve-outs or exceptions provided. There's also an exemption from income tax. Now, mind you, this equalization levy is not an income tax. It is not even an indirect tax or a transaction tax. It's a standalone levy, which has been introduced under a separate law in that sense in the Finance Act of 2016. And therefore, one has to look at the interplay of this levy with other laws like the income tax law. So one position is that is laid out in the law is that once equalization levy applies on a transaction, then the same transaction should not be subject to income tax. And this would be largely applicable where there are, in a lot of cases, there is a withholding tax applied on a certain set of transaction. Then ideally, when equalization levy applies, the withholding tax should not apply on such transaction. Unfortunately, there is a drafting error when the law got introduced. The drafting error is that this provision, which provides for mutual exclusivity between the equalization levy and the income tax, has come into effect only from 1st of April 2021. So for the current financial year, you may actually have situations where both equalization levy and withholding tax could apply on the same transaction. If the transaction is subject to both levies, then how do you get the benefit? I mean, would there be an offset available? Can the TDS which is deducted be offset against the EL liability that you pay for the current year? I mean, these are issues which have not been clarified, and representations have been made to the government to lend some clarity for the current year. There are also concerns that because a non-resident may or may not comply with the law, how would the tax authorities apply the equalization levy? There are provisions under the law which allow for the taxpayer being at risk of being subject to of the person to who the services are being provided. So the Indian payer could be classified could be regarded as an agent of the non-resident, and there are provisions even under the income tax law which deal with representative assessee, where the Indian agent could be treated as a representative assessee on behalf of the non-resident to undertake the compliance. So to say that we are a non-resident and we don't comply and there is no recourse available to the authorities to have this compliance done is not there. There is a concept of representative assessee that is there even for equalization levy. I mentioned initially that the impact of this levy cuts across sectors. There is no distinction made or no exception made for any sector. Whereas internationally, we've seen situations where there are certain carve-outs which are being made. The scope is also much narrower than how India is introduced. But India you can see out here whether it's technology, media, telecom, education sector, professional services, financial services, retail, hospitality. The list is endless. Almost any business could potentially be covered as far as transactions with non-residents is concerned. Okay, with this now, let me hand it over to Rishabh. Rishabh, over to you to take through the case studies.
In relation to a sale being made by a foreign company using its own platform. So as you could see, there is a foreign company having its own website, and it's selling it to an Indian resident or someone using an Indian IP address. And there could be two potential scenarios. Scenario one is that the goods are delivered or the services are provided outside India, and there could be a second scenario wherein the goods are delivered or the services are provided in India. Now, clearly, the areas for consideration as far as this case study goes is, can a foreign company, say of the likes of a Zara or a Marks and Spencer, which is selling goods on its own website, will it be constituted as an e-commerce operator or not? Because typically when we think of an e-commerce operator, we generally associate it with the likes of a facilitator, which is facilitating a transaction on its own website. But as far as the EL provisions go, limited to just digital goods, or does it also cover physical goods? So while clearly Naveen spoke about it in the earlier part of the discussion, wherein he mentioned that the term used is online sale of goods and not sale of online goods. Had it been latter, one would have taken a view that it's restricted to just digital goods. However, clearly, even if the goods under consideration are physical goods which are being physically delivered to the Indian resident, that clearly would fall under the ambit of EL, subject to other conditions being fulfilled. Another important question that arises in this case is whether an internal purchase order which is being raised through a ERP through which the order is being placed, is it sufficient to fall under the ambit of online sale of goods, or does one needs to look into some additional conditions to be satisfied for it to qualify as a online sale of goods? Now, important point in this scenario would be that how do you interpret this term consideration? Would it include elements like, say, a GST, or would you just test equalization levy vis-a-vis the pure sale price of the goods? So clearly this ambiguity is there in the absence of any clarification or a situation where we don't have any clarity under the laws, one will have to take the view whether GST should be included while computing the equalization levy or should it be excluded.
So let me just come in here, Rishabh, before you move on. I think this is a big area of concern as far as online sale of goods is concerned, because taking it in its literal interpretation or the way the law is currently worded, it would hardly leave aside any transaction that could potentially not be subject to equalization levy. Because if you're looking at online definition, today you would be using some digital format or the other, whether it is done through an email or it is done through an ERP software or it is done through an online platform. That's how sale of goods typically happens. That's how you place your order. But is placing of an order through an online platform or through an email or through an ERP good enough for it to be treated as a sale of goods? I think that merits an evaluation. And one will need to understand the terms of the contract as to when the sale is taking place to come to a conclusion whether this is a case of an online sale of goods or not. So in the absence of a definition of online sale, it would be unfair to say that every transaction that is consummated through a digital platform gets covered. One needs to look at it more closely, and because the intent of the law could not have been that each and every sale and purchase transaction would be subject to this 2% levy.
Yes, for consideration in such a scenario would be whether the software that is being provided, the rights for usage of software that is being provided, will it qualify as a goods or a service? Why this is relevant is because we interpret for the applicability of EL, we look at goods and services through very different lens. While we, as Naveen just spoke about, while we would test at what point of time the sale happens in a good scenario, online sale of goods, online sale happens in a good scenario. On the contrary, when it comes to services, one would like to evaluate whether an actual provision of service is happening online or not. So that is where this distinction is very important for a software. So there, maybe based on the terms of the contract, one needs to understand whether the ownership has been passed or it's just a limited right that has been provided to the customer.
Also one needs to bear in mind, Rishabh, that there is different interpretation from under the GST law. For instance, software is treated as a service, and as far as income tax is concerned, there is already a classic dispute that is going on, which is pending before the Supreme Court on what is the taxability of software, whether it is a copyrighted software product or it is a copyrighted right. So I think there's also no sort of unanimity on how the software is being classified from a direct tax and an indirect tax perspective. Also, the business models have evolved over a period of time. Gone are the days when software used to come in a box with a shrink wrap license. A lot of the software is now in a downloadable format. And again, within that also we have different versions of software. Some software could come with an enterprise license, which is more like a perpetual license. Whereas today now, with most of the software moving to a cloud, we have a lot of it which is a subscription-based model, which is software as a service. So I think one will need to look at all of these factors to make a determination of whether software is truly a goods or a services and how equalization levy could apply.
Case study, this is in the context of reimbursement of expenses. So let's take an example that a UK headquartered entity engages the service of a third party to eventually provide services to the Indian company, and the consideration for those services is paid by the UK entity to the UK based vendor, and thereafter the UK headquartered entity cross charges that amount to different group entities including India. But the question arises over here is that whether this transaction would be subject to EL, because typically if you would see these type of transactions get reported as a reimbursement of expenses as far as the UK entity is concerned, because effectively it would have paid the amount to the third party vendor and recovered that amount from its group entities. The second issue arises is that which entity in this scenario would be constituted as an e-commerce operator, whether it is the assuming the transaction here is in the nature of, say, a training related services, wherein the UK headquartered entity is engaging the services of this third party vendor. However, the Indian entity is using the platform of the third party vendor to eventually avail those services, those training services. So there it would become important to analyze whether it is the UK entity which is owning, operating or managing the platform, or whether the third party vendor, UK vendor, would be constituted as an e-commerce operator.
Let me just sort of pause here and take another example which is more live. Let's look at an educational university in UK. You know, university typically, a lot of in today's time, especially in the pandemic times, a lot of the courses are being run online, right? And this position may continue over a period of time till things normalize. Now, what happens to that facility, that service that is being provided by the university to students in India? Now, there could be two scenarios. Either the university has its own platform that it is using on which the services are being provided, or they could be using the platform which is owned by a third party through which the services are being provided, the education services are being provided. How does equalization levy in that situation? Now, this is not normally a service that is provided online. There could be some amount of online provision that happens, but by and large, this would be more of a situation that we are in today, where online services are being provided. So would the university now have to register itself and pay equalization levy? Would it have to do it in both scenarios where the platform is owned by them, or would it have to do it also in a scenario where the platform is owned by a third party, because they could use an alternative network, for instance, a Microsoft Team or a Zoom network, to be able to provide their service. Their service is largely education related services. They are not in the business of providing digital services, but it is their content which is being made available by a platform which is owned by a third party. So these are the kind of interesting issues that are coming up. No easy answers here, but I think one will have to hope that government will actually issue some sort of guidance or clarification as to what the scope is and what kind of transactions could possibly be excluded under the scope of this levy.
Or an Agoda, for instance, and typically these hotel aggregators receive consideration through different payment models. So there could be one scenario wherein the room tariff from the Indian resident or someone using an Indian IP address is the Indian resident pays directly to the overseas hotel aggregator, and for instance the consideration is $100, it's being paid directly to the overseas entity. In scenario 2, the same consideration gets routed through the Indian hotel. So as you could see on the left side, the Indian resident remits the amount to the hotel. The hotel in turn pays $2 commission to the overseas hotel aggregator. Now the question arises, so this clearly would qualify as e-commerce supply or services, because the definition says that any online sale of goods or provision of services facilitated by an e-commerce operator would be subject to an equalization levy. Clearly in this case, the hotel aggregator, the non-resident hotel aggregator would fall in this limb of the definition and would be subject to an EL. The question arises is, what about a situation if the hotel in this example is situated outside India? Now, going by the plain reading of the provisions, it seems that even in that scenario, equalization levy may potentially trigger. Again, but there could be a counter view as well, that the entity which is compensating the hotel aggregator, which is the hotel in this case, is also based out of India. So in that scenario, can one argue that EL should not apply? Again, one will have to go through the contractual terms before taking a final view that whether the facilitation services are being provided to the Indian resident which is booking the hotel, or it's just the services being provided to the hotel where the bookings are being made.
This is basically the question of what is the amount on which the equalization levy applies. Should it apply on the commission that is earned, but because the facilitation services that are being provided are only with respect to the commission that is being earned, or will it apply to the gross consideration? Again, unfortunately there is no definition of the word consideration, and therefore in the absence of a clear definition, there is a risk that the equalization levy could apply to the gross amount. So this is one area where certainly a clarification would be helpful to determine, and they've used actually different terms as far as the charge of the equalization levy is concerned, and a different term that has been used as far as exclusion the scope exclusion is concerned, whether you use the word turnover and gross receipts. So again, these are kind of issues on which one would hope there is some clarity. And the last point is, as far as multiplicity of compliance is concerned, as we can make out in these kind of models, there are now multiple compliances that are getting applicable, whether it is a withholding tax that is coming in from 1st of October, which also applies to e-commerce operators and does not make a distinction between resident and non-resident e-commerce operators, whether it is the equalization levy that we just spoke about, whether it is the TCS provisions that apply, and then GST also applies to many of these models. So there is actually increased burden that is getting added on for companies which are in this kind of a business model.
Thank you, Naveen. I have received a few questions in advance. So the first question is, will the government still come up with FAQs or clarifications?
That's $1 million question, Saloni. I don't think so. Anybody has any answer to that. In fact, everybody was hoping that some sort of an FAQ or clarification would be issued by the government as late as closer to the first deadline, which was July 7th. Unfortunately, nothing came out, and even the form or the utility was modified only on 3rd of July for companies to do compliance. I believe this is now stuck at the highest level within the government, possibly at the finance ministry level. We've heard, through informal sources that some FAQ possibly is ready, but when the government will possibly issue it is still a question mark. We also aware, as we all know, that the US has started an investigation into the digital service tax of a number of countries, of which India is also a part, which is referred to as Section 301 investigation. We don't know what the fate of that will be. That is still a process that has been initiated where India has already given its response to that. So I think that a lot of this will really depend on some bit of negotiation that may happen. And the largest impacted country here will be the US. So we will have to see what happens on that front. And maybe in the course of the year, as the government sees appropriate, they will issue some clarifications, because at least the first quarter amounts that have been paid, whatever has been reported, it doesn't seem that the government has really collected too much as a result of this scope expansion in equalization.
Question is, university providing temporary online courses, how will they get the clarification from the government?
Yeah, I think this is something which will need to be taken up through a specific representation, because this is something which is impact happening because of the current environment where technology is becoming all pervasive, and it was not intended to be a situation where the services would get provided online. And again, it will really depend on the threshold, because one doesn't know how long this online provision of services will carry on, whether the threshold of 20 million rupees is going to get reached or not. Again, there will not be a ready answer to that. So till such time the government gives any clarity on what is covered and what is not covered, they make certain exclusions for certain sectors or certain kinds of transactions. Based on the plain reading of the law, it seems to be covered. And I think to explain the concerns of the industry, it will be appropriate to do some sort of a representation to the government, hoping that they will give out some clarity and make certain exclusions.
Yeah. So the third question is, what is the approach being followed by other companies with respect to EL applicability on online sale of goods?
As I mentioned earlier, this is the most difficult question to take a call on because of the way online sale of goods, there is no definition of what is online sale. There is only definition of online. And, as we discussed, the definition of online could spread across all categories of sale and purchase transactions. And therefore, it's not that, from our experience, companies are not just jumping in and paying equalization levy on each and every transaction which involves sale of goods, especially for physical goods. They are following a little bit of a wait and watch approach, hoping that some clarity will be issued by the government, because this is one area where no other country has imposed a digital services tax on online sale of goods in the manner in which India has introduced. There are transactions on services which have been caught under different kinds of levies, but not online sale of goods. So one is hoping that the intent of the law was never to cover this in such a broad manner. So our experience is that companies are still following a more calibrated and a wait and watch approach rather than just going ahead and paying equalization levy, and also trying to build a little bit more rational and and technical analysis based on their terms of the contract as to how it could be defended that a certain category of transactions do not fall within the ambit of online sale of goods.
Thank you. So the next question is, can a non-resident avail credit of EL under the text treaty?
So this is again something which India has done, which was not in consonance with what was provided under the Action Plan 1, because when they made the recommendation, they said that any imposition that is done, any levy that is introduced should be, in compliance or should be in conformity with the treaty obligations. They should not just introduce a levy unilaterally, which is not, cannot be given effect to under the tax treaty. India has obviously chosen to implement it as a standalone levy, which is not an income tax. And because it is not an income tax, there's a question mark on whether it is covered within the definition of taxes under the treaty. So the creditability of the equalization levy under the tax treaty is still a questionable thing. It's not clear under the law where this is really what is the nature of this tax or levy. However, there is a possibility that individual countries may provide some sort of a deduction or a credit for this tax under the respective laws. That will be more of a country-to-country level determination. Again, this is one area one would hope that the government would have clarified that this is a creditable tax and does not become an additional cost of doing business. But again, India has chosen the path of treating it as a standalone levy. So creditability could still be a question mark.
Is EL applicable on charges paid for intra-group services?
Yeah, I think that was covered by Rishabh also in his example, but I mean, that was more in the context of reimbursements. But like I mentioned in the beginning, as far as intercompany services are concerned, one will have to look at the category of online provision of services. Are these services actually being provided or rendered online, or is it a mere case of transmission of the deliverable that is happening online? So, for instance, if a lawyer is providing a service, now that is not a case of an online provision of service, because the lawyer services are normally, legal services are normally provided, are typically not delivered online, even though the final, let's say, an opinion has to be given or a document has to be provided, that may be transmitted online. So there's a differentiation that has to be made. But let's say if you get into an online website where you can, let's say a will has to be prepared, and there are several versions of it which could be downloaded from the internet, and you can customize it appropriately, which does not involve any actual service being rendered physically, then one could say that is an online service because everything is actually happening through an online format. So one will have to make a distinction between what is true online provision of services and what is really where the service is only being transmitted via an email, the deliverable is being transmitted via an email, but the service actually is not being rendered online.
Over to you.
Thanks Naveen and Rishabh. I was very keen to join this session about the equalization levy because I had absolutely no idea what the hell it was, and I wanted to find out. I'm not sure I know much more now than I did before, but at least I am familiar with the term equalization levy. It all seems very complicated. You guys seem to have more questions than we do. So if that's the case, I'm not sure we are ever going to get on top. And I would like to thank you very much, but just some very basic big picture clarifications. It seems to be that this is a levy or a tax that's being imposed by the Indian authorities on foreign companies selling online goods and services. And the way it's looking to be enforced is, well, if that foreign company does not comply, there are implied assessees, the individuals who are actually accessing those goods or services or buying those goods or services are the ones that are going to be responsible for paying the. We've certainly have got a lot of room for thought over there. And to conclude, Naveen and Rishabh, thank you very much. That's been an eye-opener, and it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. So I'm sure we will have another one of these sessions at some point or the other in the future. And once again, thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Jack.